start. Thank you for your patience, everybody. There are still a few people who are not here, so if they come in, well, that's fine. So good evening, everybody. I'm Sarah, the Chief Executive here at Wentworth Woodhouse. Lovely to see you all. Every lecture we have, we seem to be getting more and more people coming along, which is great. Tonight's lecture is really exciting because when Dorian spoke to us in his previous lecture, he was talking about the roof project, which was completed. And actually, today he's obviously talking to you about the Camellia House, which is a project that is live at the moment and that we're hoping to start this year. So something that we're all really passionate about. Just before we start, if the fire alarm should go off, it's not expected to, but it's playing up a little bit at the moment. So if it does go off, don't panic. Do follow myself and the volunteers. We'll take you out to the fire point outside if it should go off. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dorian. Dorian is our lead architect on the project here. As I say, it's his second of 3 lectures that he's going to give us. So over to you, Dorian, to tell us about the Camellia House.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everybody. I'm Dorian Proudfoot. I'm Conservation Architect at Donald Insall Associates. And as Sarah said, I am the lead consultant and the lead architect for the work that we're doing on the Camellia House. So the plan this evening is to initially talk you through a sort of photographic tour of the building so that you understand what I'm talking about, and for those of you that are less familiar with the building, then I will give a brief history of the building and how it's evolved over time and how it sits within the estate here. I will then talk about the process that we went through over the last year whilst we've been doing this project, from the beginning to where we are now, about to start on site hopefully. And then I will talk you through the plans in a bit more detail for what it's going to be. So to put the Camellia House in context, on a few of these slides I've put a red star next to it so that you can see it when we're looking at plans, etc. But it sits up there in the southwest corner of the gardens. We're currently down here in the mansion. You entered through off the road there past the stables. Camellia House is up there in the tops of the slide. It sits rather nicely with its own sort of lawn near the Ionic Temple, which is here on the south terrace. You can see the stables up there, which you drove past as you came down, and the mansion house up here. So the Camellia House is a 2-star listed building, and it's currently on the Historic England Heritage at Risk Register. It's category D, which means that a new use has been proposed, but it's not yet been put into place. So to give you a bit of a tour of the building, this is actually the approach. If you were going to the Camellia House from the gardens, this is the first view that you would get of it. This is the north elevation, and is actually the front of the Camellia House. So a lot of people think that the south elevation is the front, but actually this is the designed entrance to the Camellia House. It's in sandstone. You've got the 2 flanking wings, which are in sandstone, and the central bay is actually in limestone, which is a bit unusual for this building at this time on this estate, and I'll talk about that more in the history of the building, but it's quite a striking, unusual facade, the north elevation. You've got the entrance door in the middle with 2 windows either side, and then the single rooms, the wings to the east and the west, and behind you can see the brick Camellia House. So a bit more detail of this limestone north elevation with the sort of blocked columns and the sort of expressed voussoirs, which is not something that's seen elsewhere on the estate. It's, as I say, it's in limestone, which is not what they were using to build at this time on the estate. So it's thought that this part of the building is actually recycled from an earlier garden building, and then it was added with the side wings. The current south facade is neoclassical. It's quite austere. It's not too showy. It's got some nice paired pilasters at either end. The magnificent huge sash windows, 3 either side of the central 3-bay entrance. So in the middle, these are actually doors. So you get a feel for the size of these windows. It's got these 4 ionic columns which sit just in front of the rest of the facade to sort of project a bay over the top of the entrance. It's got a stone balustrade with nice turned balusters, and then a series of die stones which originally had statues sat on top of them. And you'll see them in some of the photos later on. It sits on a stone plinth. So this is all sandstone, which goes with what was being used on the estate at this time. And there is a nice fountain in front. And then behind where we took the photograph is the lawn. So a bit of a close-up of these amazing windows, 20 over 20, so 20 panes over 20, huge sliding sashes with the lovely columns in between them. And then from the inside, this is the central door. So actually that is, head height, just to give you a scale of the size of these windows, with fixed lights above them. There is a plaster detail and then a timber cornice above that. The windows are interesting once you look at them closely. They're actually sort of standard timber surrounds to the frames and the timber sash boxes, but the glazing bars, in order to get them so slender, they're actually made of metal. So it's a copper glazing bar and with a iron core, which unfortunately has been its downfall because copper doesn't rust, but the iron inside does. So as water has eventually got to that, it's expanded as it's rusted, and unfortunately most of the windows are in pretty poor condition. Of course, we'll try and save as much as we can. So any glazing bar that is in good condition, we're going to reuse, and hopefully we'll have enough to do one whole window with the original. The sandstone facade, just to show you a bit more detail, the amazing columns with the lovely Ionic capitals, with the scrolls, and the pilasters next to the freestanding columns with the capitals. So inside, I've done these slides in the sequence that you will enter the building when it's in use. So this is the tea room, so Lady Rockingham's tea room, which is the main room on the north side, with a statue niche on the east elevation. So there would have been a statue in here. Some panelling on the north elevation. This is modern, but the whole room would have been panelled originally. It's got a modern ceiling joist, but the truss, king truss, is actually original. And at the moment you walk on a brick floor, but that's the subfloor. And when we moved the stacked up timber from the corner, we were fortunate to find some of the original stone flooring, which was excellent. It gives us an exact idea of the dimensions and the pattern, the design. So it's a diamond design with slate, so a black diamond surrounded by the paler limestone, the white stones. So that's brilliant evidence for us when we're thinking about how we're going to redesign the interiors. In the same room, but on the opposite side, is the fireplace. So this would have provided comfort to Lady Rockham when she's in taking her tea. And fortunately some of the original panelling. So again, that is excellent evidence for us of the proportions, the style, how the room would have been fitted out. And equally there is some remains of the fireplace, so marble fire surround. I think we have actually 3 pieces. They would have sat within a larger fire surround, but the fact that we've got those 3 is excellent. And again, we'll try and reuse them in our proposed design. So either side of this tea room, there were supporting rooms. This is the room to the west, which is just a simple space with steps down to a very small cellar, which had a light well or a coal chute, so would have been used for storing coal for the fires or for food. Got the original timber trusses, which are in fairly poor condition because of the water ingress. A bit more of a modern roof. Concrete floor, which is obviously modern. The building started to be redeveloped by the previous owner, but they didn't see it through. Same room, a different view. And then in the mirrored room on the other side of the central tea room is again a single room with a door and 2 sash windows either side. You can see the mixture of materials on the wall. This would have been hidden by the wall finishes, which have since been lost, and a modern concrete slab, which we will be removing because that's not going to be good for the future use of the building. Now the main event, the Camellia room, which is an absolutely magnificent space with the iron trusses, obviously the incredible camellias, which have been discovered to be incredibly rare, much to the envy of other camellia owners. It's a really incredible collection, so something that the estate will want to celebrate. They sit within planters, beds with stone surrounds, there's a stone floor, there's some statue plinths there, which we'll talk about later. There's a central door which leads through to the tea room with flues either side, which are part of the original heating system. On the right of the door, the single skin of the flue has come away, which has helped us to understand the building, and some pieces of the original door casing survive. You see the size of the camellias, so that they're sort of that size at the bottom due to their age. Interesting feature of the building is the hypercaust. So it was heated. So underneath the floor there was a series of trenches which hot air would have circulated to heat the building. One of the stones was broken when we started the project, so we were able to see that quite easily. So a hypercaust ran down here and another one ran down the back of the camellias and then up those chimney flues. And they were fired by these stoke holes, which are on the north elevation, either side of the stone part. This would have had a lean-to roof to shelter a couple of poor unfortunate souls, which would have been shoveling coal constantly to provide heat to warm the plants and the people in the building. But quite an interesting feature and something that, of course, we want to keep visible and to celebrate. So the next few slides gives a bit of an understanding of the history of the Camellia House, how it sits in the estate. I've tried to label the sequence of events. So number one is the sort of original core to the building that we're in now. Number two is the west front, when that was completed. And then three is the menagerie, and there was a greenhouse. And then the south terrace was completed. And then the east front, and then the stables, and then the Camellia House was refronted to what we see now on the south elevation. So, starting with the house, 1620s was when Thomas Wentworth, the first Earl of Stafford, rebuilt the house. Some of that remains. There's like a door here, and some of the internal walls around here remain from that house, but it's since been extended quite considerably. So that's 1620s. Then the first Marquess of Rockingham, about 100 years later, which was Thomas Watson Wentworth, rebuilt the west front in a Baroque style. So that was 1728. It's thought that the architect was James Gibbs, but almost immediately after finishing this, he employed Ralph Tunnicliffe to start the design for the east front, so the Palladian, that side of the building. And it's at this point that a greenhouse or a tea room was built in the gardens. So the original part of the Camellia House dates from 1732 and was designed by Ralph Tunnicliffe, who had just been commissioned to do the Palladian east front. But as I say, the limestone element we think is recycled from an earlier garden building. This is actually a late 18th century drawing, and note that it's got a slate roof over the now glazed Camellia House, these chimneys which are no longer there, but most of this elevation is as it is today. This is a very early plan, so this is from 1740s, which is showing the menagerie, and the greenhouse of the conservatory. And then a few years later, so 1736, the south terrace was constructed with the Ionic Temple, which sits very near to the Camellia House. And then the magnificent east front was completed, so this is 1750. So as I say, it was started by Ralph Tunnicliffe, but it was completed by Henry Flitcroft in 1750. And then the stables, which was started in 1766 by John Carr of York, and the stables are absolutely incredible. some of the finest example in the country. We're very fortunate to be working on the stables as well. So we're currently producing plans for the south half of the stables, which is what I'll be talking about in my next lecture next month. But just for now, just to give you an image of how striking and large the stables are. I think a lot of people, I've heard anecdotally, drive onto the estate, see the stables, think they've arrived at the house, when actually it's not. So a series of plans showing the Camellia House, how it evolved over time. So this is a map from 1778 by William Fairbank, and it shows a greenhouse labelled where the Camellia House is, and a menagerie. So quite common for country houses to have menageries, so exotic animals, a collection of exotic animals for displaying their wealth and for entertainment. This is a lovely plan and elevation from 1788, which refers to the tea room. So you can see tea room written there, which has a greenhouse, slightly smaller in plan than the Camellia House now, but very similar facade. So 3 sash windows either side, and then 3 central bays with columns, but note there's not as much decoration. So this is 1788. And then in 1812, the south front of the Camellia House was remodelled by Watson and Pritchett, from architects from York. This is a late 19th century image, but it shows you the next stage in the Camellia's development. And note the statues, the 4 seasons statues over the south front, and some fruit baskets either side. So that refacing, so there's quite a few different explanations of the history of the building, but I think my vote is that this was extended, so you can see how this blind window would have been central in the original greenhouse, and then as the south front was extended, it's now become asymmetrical, at which point the new iron trusses were installed, new stone balustrade. The cornice on the north front is original, it's in a lot worse condition than this. So you can see how the building has evolved there. And then there's a series of maps showing the development of the menagerie. So quite simple on this plan, without fountain. That plan was from 1841. And then 1855 OS map, you start to see a more substantial structures around here for the menagerie and a fountain. And then some further development of the gardens just to the south. So some more intricate pathways, and the lawn's been broken up a bit more. So that's 1892. And then in 1930, the menagerie structures have been removed, although it's still known as the menagerie. And some photos of the Camellia House that we're fortunate to have from the archives from the 1930s. So showing the statues over the front, the amazing windows in action, and a very happy chap next to the fountain. And then another lovely image showing it sort of in its heyday. You've got the glazed roof with a couple of opening lights there for ventilation. Lovely planting around the lawned area around the pond. And then a country life image from pre-war. So showing quite a smart south front with a hard standing. Very tidy. And then my favourite image from around 1900, the interior. So you can really feel the atmosphere. You see the statue on the plinth there. It's really lovely for understanding how the Camellia House would have been when it was full of plants. And then the mining. So this is a very interesting chapter in the Camellia House's history, but actually it fared very well considering. So you can see how close the mining got. So that's the fountain out the front, mining right up to the west front. Incredible, really. The south terrace has been respected, but not much else. Yeah, so the size of the spoil heaps, dwarfing the Camellia House, really. And it's so these are images. So 1947 was when the mining stopped, and 48. And then in this plan, 1976, the OS map shows they've sort of rebuilt the landscape, but in much more simpler form. So the statues, we've seen, fortunately we've got these historic images, but there's evidence of them being ordered in 1814 by the 4th Earl. So they were Code stone, which is sort of fake stone by Eleanor Code, 4 seasons and 2 fruit baskets. So there's an order that they've got in the archive of those being placed. And then in the 1968 listing, they're noted as being removed. So potentially they were removed because of damage, potentially because of the mining. You know, they used explosives, there was a lot of debris flying around, so potentially removed because of that. You'll see in a minute in the elevations of the building that the building, because of the mining, has lent considerably, and potentially they became unstable as a result of that. So that's given hopefully a brief history of the Camellia House and how actually from the 1930s and those photographs it's relatively, it's fared relatively well. Obviously the glass roof has been lost, but the windows are still there and all the pieces are still there for us to understand. So our project, we started with this brief from the Trust, which is an extract from the master plan. So it had been decided that this was going to be a cafe and an events venue, using the main Camellia room as the main space for entertainment, sitting for the cafe, supported by ancillary spaces to the north. So on this plan it's showing toilets, a kitchen and storage. That was our starting point. We started the project in January last year, so we've been going for just over a year now. And the process was, first off, we employ some surveyors to take a measured survey of the building so that we have an accurate record of exactly where the walls are, where the features stand at that time for us to then develop our plans. So we get plans drawn up, sections, so that we can understand the building in 3 dimensions, the different levels of the floors, the spaces inside. We can start thinking how we're going to develop the proposals. You can see the lean on the building, which is quite noticeable. We actually asked them to go back and check that they'd drawn it correctly because it's quite extreme. The north elevation, just drawn up accurately so that we can start producing our proposals on plans for the contractors and everyone to understand, all our conversations with stakeholders and Historic England, future users, etc. The south elevation, every window pane, documented, all the detail for us to draw on. They take a laser scan internally, which is very useful. It produces a sort of Google Street View for us to walk around remotely back at our desks when we're producing our proposals. We have lots of site meetings with different people, different stakeholders, Sarah and her team understanding how they want to use the space to help us with our designs and where we're going to put things. We talk to Historic England, we talk to local authority, we talk to kitchen designers, our team of consultants, our structural engineers, M&E engineers, the plaster specialists, the ecologist, archaeologists, everyone. We have lots of meetings on site. Visit local buildings to understand the vernacular style, how the materials, similar materials have fared over time. This is the Holy Trinity Church in the village. We then carry out detailed surveys on site. We hire a cherry picker so that we can get to all different views, different areas, the roof, which we obviously can't see from the ground, to understand the building. We try and get all consultants together, we did on the same day, so that we can share the information, share our findings, and start the conversation of what everyone thinks about how we can fix the building and how we can make the most of the space. Some views from the cherry picker showing the different roofs. So the flanking roofs would have been Westmoreland slate. The central pediment would have been lead because it's a bit of a shallower pitch. You can see the gutter on top and then the iron trusses. So from the cherry picker we can start to see the damage that's been caused by the plant growth, the detailing from before, so the gutters where they failed, start to understand how the building can be improved. Internally, we poke around a lot This is colleague Tom Bromett, who was one of the architects on the project with me, picking up a piece of the door casing to work out where it went, if we can reuse it, what the door would have looked like. Take lots of notes, do lots of sketches, take lots of dimensions, sketch details of how the building was put together, how we might put it back together. Stone samples, so we want to understand exactly what the stone is that's there, because it's you have to very carefully select new stone so that it's compatible with the old stone. So if some stone has fallen off, we can pick that up without damaging the building and send it off for chemical analysis. We do the same with mortar, other materials as well, paint analysis. We start our condition survey drawings. So Donald Insall Associates, we're specialist conservation architects, so we really understand how to fix a building. We look at every single stone, every window, every piece of timber, and produce proposals of how to appropriately repair. We do that for all the elevations, all the plans, showing areas of repointing, areas of stone, where stone needs to be replaced, what type of stone. We've got keys showing exactly what material, to communicate with the builders and the QS when they want to price up how much this project might cost. So I've got a series of extracts from the other consultants' reports, which are really useful to show you the process and their interesting findings. So starting with the archaeologist, they produced a historic building record. This was specified by Historic England, who have supported the project all along, and have encouraged us to produce this record as a record of the building before the project, anything happens on the project. So they talk about the phasing of the building, the different age of the fabric, the particular features of interest. So we've got some graffiti, we've got some original rainwater harvesting, which I'll talk about later, but you know, they were collecting rain from the roof down lead pipes in the walls into lead troughs hidden in the walls to then feed the camellias, which is innovative, I think. The flues, which help tell the story about the hypercaust and how the building was heated. These are images of the troughs in the walls. The stoke holes, obviously, they talk about those. We worked with Top & Co, who are very well-renowned metalwork specialists from Yorkshire. We commissioned them to help us understand the iron trusses and the condition that the iron trusses were in, and whether we can reuse them, which fortunately we can. They advise on any appropriate repairs to those. But because we found that the windows are also made of metal, they helped us to look at those. So really nice detailed images for record of the glazing bars. They also look at how it was, how the windows were put together using their knowledge of metal. So the rust jacking, as I talked about, the iron within the core, how the different pieces of metal were forged together, how the metal was screwed and connected to the timber frame. They also look at all other metal elements in the building. So the pulleys for the sash windows, the handles for lifting the sashes, and the hook on the upper sash. So, you know, if you're trying to operate the windows, then you need all this different ironmongery for the windows. Lead weights in the box frames of the sash windows. So a really good record of all the metal in the building, and then further help on the window repairs and specifications. We worked with MAB, the ecologists. So a project like this, we need to prove to the local authority and for our own benefit what ecology is using the building, you know, bats and other birds and newts and whatever, you know, they do a full survey showing the kind of the risk factor of taking into account the condition of the building. I think because this building had emergency repairs, so the roof had been removed and it had plastic sheeting, there's a lot of a lower chance of there being bats, but they still have to do all their survey work and map any activity from bats. So these squiggly lines are where they've recorded bat activity. Luckily they aren't roosting in the building, they're using it during the evening to kind of to rest whilst they're foraging for food. They do sound recordings to make sure that there aren't any bats kind of hidden away. Hutton and Rostron are timber specialists who, again, we commissioned to help to understand the condition of all the timber within the building, so the trusses, all the roof fabric. They carry out detailed surveys with us using the cherry pickers and ladders and whatnot to poke around all the different pieces of timber, identify fruiting bodies. So this is wet rot growing on the timbers and the rafters. How timbers sit within the walls, so something that we see all the time on historic buildings. If there's an issue with the gutters or the pointing, rainwater's penetrating the walls, any timber that sat within that wall is going to be soaking up that moisture and rotting, unfortunately. So of course we had that in this instant. We've got insects, because once the timbers get to a certain moisture content, if it's a damp building, then the insects are able to start enjoying the wood. So here you've got insects eating away on the king post, on the truss from both sides. Got some dry rot, of course. Wouldn't be a Wentworth building without a bit of dry rot. They use moisture meters to check. So actually this timber isn't wet enough for fungal decay which is nice. A bit less scientific method of stabbing it with a screwdriver. So the timber's at high level. Of course, the glass roof has been lost for decades. So timber that wasn't supposed to be exposed to the rain has been and has rotted away. So these very heavy iron trusses are just sat on a rotten piece of timber. Lots of vegetation growing. They also look at other timbers around the building. So the soffit, which is rotted away, the door frames where they sit near to the damp floor, they're soaking up water and rotting. Behind the panelling, because again the wall fabric has been subject to water ingress, you get moisture build-up behind the panelling. So I think some of this is kind of obvious. Of course it's going to be a damp building, but we need to understand it when we're proposing new fabric. So we want to insulate this building, but there's no point putting insulation on a damp wall. So we have to detail the building. Buildings take years to dry out. However, Sarah, obviously they need to, as part of the business plan, need to operate this building as soon as possible. So we have to think about that when we're detailing how the new building is going to be put together. Finally, in their report, and quite interestingly, they take the debris from the insects and they can, under a microscope, work out what insect it is, and it's deathwatch beetle, which sounds quite scary, but hasn't been too much of a, because a lot of the timber is going to be replaced as it's not original. And they can also identify the species of timber in the trusses, so oak. And then they put their information together on a very useful plan, which we can then feed into the structural engineer and to our designs when we're proposing what to do with the building. We also worked with Hurst Conservation, who are specialist conservators to help with the plaster. So they carry out their own analysis of the different conditions of the plaster, the different ages of the plaster, identify where it's detaching from the wall, where the plaster cornice is actually Roman cement, so it's very heavy, and unfortunately trying to exit the building, which we don't want a very heavy piece of cornice to land on someone having a cup of tea in the Camellia House. So we've got the good evidence of the design. The Roman cement is not the best material because it's not as breathable as lime, so from this we can kind of make that firm decision that we do need to remove this cornice. However, we can go back with the same design but in a more appropriate lime plaster. They analyse all the plaster in the building and provide these very useful pictures showing the different phases of plaster work, and then most importantly for us in our proposals, what's live, as in what's active and not stuck nicely to the wall anymore. And as you can see by the amount of red crosshatches, most of it is unfortunately has failed. But again, it helps with our decision making, so it's good to know. They take samples of all the different materials and analyse them again in the laboratory, and to provide information on what those materials were, so the different strengths of lime, the different aggregates, so sands, etc., in order for us to help with our specification for new plaster, so that it can be as kind of close matching to the original as possible. Some good images from the structural engineers reports. So they did borehole logs, so they look at what the soil is underneath the building from historic information. Some good images of the trusses, how they sit on the rotting timbers, how the trusses were put together. some good photos from above showing the various different different conditions of the truss where the plants have started to take hold. Work with a tree specialist, so arboriculturist, so Camellia House is there in the middle, and then we've surveyed all the trees and the surroundings because we do want to do some landscaping works and provide information on every different tree and comments and recommendations of what should be removed, what should be kept. And then we get to the fun part, so this is our concept design. So the first kind of presentation that we give to Sarah and the team here is our initial proposals. So we start by kind of analysing the aesthetics of the different areas of the building. We take the brief, so the different proposed uses of the rooms. We work that through as a team with all of our consultants, and then we present our first sketch scheme, which the main approach we want to reinstate from the north as the original intention. So you come into a servery, so that this is where the counter will be and you can kind of purchase your food and drink. We have proposed to move the toilets from where they were originally intended to go, so into the east flanking wing, and then a kitchen on the west. Initially we were thinking about a small extension to add some more space for the staff. We're thinking about access, we want to make it as accessible as possible. And then obviously the main seating area in the Camellia House. And above all else, the camellias are the stars of the show, so we need to respect them. Thinking about rainwater harvesting to feed the camellias, irrigate the camellias. Produce this concept sketch showing how we want to make use of natural light, natural ventilation. We need to keep the conditions right for the camellias. We met with Geraldine King from Chiswick House. They've got a good collection of camellias themselves. She came up and advised us on the best conditions for the camellias. Rainwater harvesting, so that we can feed them with rainwater rather than mains water. Underfloor heating, so again going back with the original heating method. We work with our M&E, mechanical and electrical engineers, to help with the strategy. So again, they take our concept sketch and then work it up, and we think about blinds to stop direct sunlight on the camellias, blinds on the windows, underfloor heating, a new insulating slab, rainwater harvesting, ground source heat pump as an option for powering the building rather than using gas. They do a summary of all the different low to zero carbon energy options. The two most applicable are air source heat pumps and ground source heat pumps. Then analyse those against all the different renewable options to work out what it's going to cost for the trust over the lifetime of the building, how much carbon is produced by each option, so that we can try and make our designs as kind of minimal carbon emitting as possible, including the embodied carbon of the building materials that we put in, and then the life cycle. And ground source heat pumps came out the winners, and the slinky coil, the horizontal coil, rather than the boreholes, which are rather expensive to build. Simultaneously, the landscape architects, so landscape agency, were working up proposals for the new surrounding landscape around the Camellia House. So a new entrance from the north, a levelled surface at the doors so that we don't have steps up, disabled parking, just kind of out of the view, and then using the historic images, the country life images, reinstating hard standing to the south for seating, and trying to focus the tables and chairs either side of the Camellia House so that the main elevation isn't cluttered. Reinstatement of the fountain, obviously. And now we get on to our designs, a series of slides showing how, I tried to summarise how we sort of developed the design. We had weekly meetings with Sarah and her team from the beginning of the project, with the steering group, including some of the trustees, Historic England, stakeholders, so the food and beverage manager, the events managers from here, and then occasionally we'd bring in extra consultants. If for 1 week we were talking about the power, for example, then we'd invite the power consultant. So we started off with accessible toilets, unisex toilets, and we know from Sarah and our briefers that we want to make Wentworth Woodhouse one of the most accessible country house attractions in the country. So we've included a changing places toilet. We had to include a bin store. Initially, that's where we put things. We then realised that it's not very nice putting a changing places toilet up near the bins. You don't want to feel like you're going, up to the bins to go to the toilet. So we kind of rejig things. We talk about how that affects the layout. We talk about the kitchen with the catering manager and the kitchen designers. We then evolve the design even further so that we can improve the layout internally, add a storage room to the changing places toilet, so that we kind of, as people are thinking about the project, we're making sure that we're covering all bases. The wider context, we're going to include a new path to connect to the garden centre next door, so that larger events can have kind of evening parking, which is a bit closer to the Camellia House. And then we produce our more detailed designs so that these can be submitted for consents. We need to get listed building consent from the local authority, and because it's grade 2 star, we need Historic England's approval. Lots of people need to be consulted on the designs. It's quite a significant building and quite a significant estate. So our proposals evolve. We've got quite a busy kitchen so that they can operate and make the most of the commercial opportunity. We're starting to show the floor finishes. So you can see the diamond pattern, which we've got from the historic evidence. Got unisex toilets. Because of the ground source heat pumps and the different technologies we're using, we need to have a sort of a plant room. Got an accessible toilet. Camellia room. It's quite simple. It's not too much that we kind of want to change with that. It kind of speaks for itself. Roof plan showing our new glazed roof with all opening lanterns on the north side, so that we can get that through ventilation from the huge sash windows. Westmoreland slate. Obviously with the roof project here, we've got a lot of old slates that are perfectly usable in storage, so we want to use them for the roofs that were originally slated. We don't want to put lead on the central pediment. That's what it would have had. That's what the previous owners started to put on, and it got stolen twice. We need to consider that. This is quite a remote building on the park, on the estate, so we don't want to leave the trust with a risk. So we're proposing to use zinc, but we have done it on previously, and with permission, we've kind of detailed it to look like lead. It is cheating, but it's better than putting on lead and it being stolen 3 months later. Start to show our sections in detail. So we've got underfloor heating, a new slab, so we're kind of respecting the original heating. We've got trenches behind the camellias for services, hidden out the way of the visitors. We've got the cellar, and this is the kitchen. Start to show where insulation is going to go. We want to improve the fabric of the building as much as possible. The tea room, we want to repanel. Again, we kind of insulate it with breathable insulation so that the heating bills are as low as possible. The carbon factor. Floors, at the moment, like I said, the whole building is leaning, the floor is leaning. We don't really want people to be sat at their table with a cup of tea on an angle. So we do need to lift that floor, relay a nice new level slab in limecrete, so again it's breathable with the underfloor heating in it. And then we'll ramp up between the camellias, so that, because there's a bit of a change in level between the tea room and the camellia room. A long section through the Camellia House showing, the amazing camellias, the reinstated door casing with pediment above, and the glass roof, and then the front elevation. We are hopeful that we'll be able to reinstate statues, funding dependent, but we'll get permission for it, hopefully, and we will put it in the tender. Side elevation showing all the proposed changes and repairs, and then the north elevation with the ramping up so that it's accessible in the future. Make use of the original vents and the stoke holes, reopened on the west side and celebrated on the east. Another end elevation. We would like to repair the fountain. It's missing its top tier, so we need a stonemason to recreate the top tier, which is gone. We will repair the basin so that it holds water again. We'll install a new pump. And there's also another smaller pond just to the side of the Camellia House, which again is an early feature we want to reinstate. So at the end of the project, hopefully this fountain will be working again. A separate sheet showing the statues. We think there are very similar statues on another local orangery. So you can either take casts of those or laser scans and then create copies. So I'll whiz through some of our slides just showing how this is a traditional project, which means the builder, we design everything and the contractor builds to all of our designs. So we need to think about every single detail. We propose improvements where possible, like we did on the roof here. So we improve the rainwater goods, we add insulation, make sure everything's working as well as it can. Special details for how the new floor is going to work with the original walls, repairs to the north doors, adding breathable insulation to the roofs as we've done here, so that they keep the warmth in, keep the rain out, reline the existing stone gutters. Think about internal insulation as well and how that's going to work with the cornices. You don't want to leave any sort of cold spots, so we kind of think about lots of insulation where we can. Privacy, we want them to look like modern toilets that we've installed. We don't want to pretend like they're original, so we think carefully about the detailing there, the steps, how to get down to them. We consult with the fire engineer. It needs to be safe, so we work out where the fire compartment's going to be for the kitchen. That's the biggest risk. Structural engineer provides some drawings showing the repairs required to the trusses and propping in between, so that the building isn't at risk of moving whilst we're taking the trusses off the roof. And new brackets to fix the trusses down to the wall tops, so we don't want it to blow away. Drainage strategy, so we want to collect all that rainwater to reuse it for the camellias and for flushing the toilets to save energy, save the bills, save the unnecessary use of mains water. And with the M&E engineers, we think about the lighting scheme. We want some nice subtle lighting of the camellias. We want nice subtle lighting in the camellia room. We don't want anything too showy. Like I said, the camellia room speaks for itself. And some lovely architectural lighting on the south elevation. So in evening events, you've got a nice wash. Underfloor heating. This is the mechanical drawing, so showing where the underfloor heating is. Services to the fountain, ground source heat pumps down here, rainwater harvesting tanks up here. The landscape architects provide their sort of final drawing showing the new planting schemes and the trees that are going to be reused, the lawned area, hard standing, all part of the design so that the contractor can deliver the whole package. Finally, just to talk about the wider scheme, so this Camellia House project also includes the car park. I won't go into too much detail, it's near the stables, so I'll probably cover it next month in that lecture, but we are proposing as part of this project to remove the modern swimming pool building, which you drove past when you arrived, to provide a new car park, which will provide visitor parking for events, and to redesign how visitors use the whole estate. We've been able to sort of integrate that into this project, so the way that visitors arrive to the stables, go off to events at the Camellia House and then down to the house. And then I'll just finish with some nice images of the Camellia House whilst you think of any questions that you may have. So we started the project, like I say, in January in the snow. And it has been an absolute pleasure to work on it so far, and hopefully we'll get some funding imminently and permission to proceed to carry out the works this year, essentially. So thank you very much for listening, and yeah, please ask any questions you feel.
Thank you, Dorian. Has anybody got any questions?
How have the camellias managed to survive all this time?
How have they managed to survive? They're remarkable, aren't they?
They're more robust than people seem to think.
They are, absolutely. They are indeed. And actually what we've done, of course, we want to make sure that nothing goes wrong. We're doing everything we can to protect them both when we come to do the development and obviously once we've got a new use for that Camellia House building. So we've propagated 2 complete sets from the sets we've got. So we've got 2 backup sets. And actually, we'd like to do some more propagation of them as well. So we'd like that to be a bit of an ongoing project to propagate those we propagated. They take quite a time. They take about 5 years to propagate because they're a bit like older ladies. They take a bit longer than younger ladies, but they've done very well so far. Our 2 sets are looking good. It is important that we take really good care of them, and Chiswick have given us an enormous amount of help and advice. To make sure. One of the biggest challenges we've got is they're actually going from outside to inside now as part of this. So although they originally were inside, they then smashed through the roof, so it became an outdoor environment, and they're going back into an indoor environment. So it's remarkable how they've survived. They are, we believe, some of the oldest in the Western world, if not the oldest.
They've got quite a good Camellia House at Yorkshire Sculpture Park.
Yeah, they have. Yeah. Yeah, and actually, just one thing to add, I mean, what we've been going through up until now is the development phase of this project. All of our projects are in 2 phases. So the development phase, which is actually, to the outsiders looking in, it might seem like not a lot is happening, but actually the development phase is the phase that gives me and everybody else on the team all of the headaches. So for the last year, as Dorian said, we've been working our way through all of these reports and consultants coming in and design meetings, and we've got it. We're actually at the easy part now. So now that's all packaged up. We've just got to secure the funding. We'll find out on March the 17th whether we've got the funding or not. Touch wood. And then if we get the funding, then we go into delivery phase. The delivery phase is actually the bit where everybody thinks there's lots of work going on, but it's actually the easier phase of the 2. It's when the contractor comes on site and actually takes all of that work that's been done over the last year and makes it happen. So we'll find out on March the 17th whether it's go or not. I'm sure it will be. I'm pretty confident.
Sarah,
Yes.
you've actually touched on the question that intrigues me, because I didn't realise that it was a glass roof in the first place, and the one thing you can't do is stop trees growing.
No.
So how do you prune them back?
We prune them back. We've already pruned them back. So Chiswick have advised Scott, who's our head gardener, on how to do that, and it is a case of pruning them down, and they're actually a lot. He's already pruned them down quite a lot. So yeah, it is manageable, and Scott's taken all the advice on that. So
I appreciate that. There's just got to be sort of an annual haircut for them.
Yeah, they're going to have to be looked after. Yeah, Steve, do you want to answer that? Are you?
No, I don't want to answer that.
I just because you're part of the gardening team, I wondered if you've got a specific date.
Just to reiterate what you said, actually, we've been pruning very, very gently
Yeah.
the camellias back, and actually you can see the impact that that's had, because when we started, most of the growth was through the roof, and as we prune them back year by year, you now start to see them bushing out from the bottom, which is exactly what we want. So they look more like shrubs rather than leggy trees.
Yeah.
Now I've got a question from the online audience, from Margaret, and it's about the roof. How will thieves know it's zinc and not lead?
Good question.
Big sign on it.
Well, okay, so the zinc, I guess it's harder to steal zinc because it's a hard metal, whereas lead is soft metal. So the way zinc is installed, it's kind of clipped over itself. They won't be able to take it off, essentially, but it will look different. Zinc is a different colour, so from afar it will it won't catch your eye, but it will clearly be zinc.
I think as well, another point to make is that since the trust come on site, we've introduced extensive security systems. Bearing in mind our chair, of course, is the queen of alarms and security. So there will be sophisticated security systems up there as well.
Yes.
Yes, Dorian, are you relying basically on service ventilation, or are you going to have the box sashes operating?
Yeah, no, there's no mechanical ventilation, so it's all natural.
Right.
But as you've said, the camellias have been well ventilated for a long time, and we're now trying to impose ourselves on them and use it for our benefit as well. So we do have to be really careful. But that's why we're proposing to install opening vents the whole way. You saw in the old photographs, they only had four opening vents. We're going to have them on every single pane. But yes, the windows they're a key part. Yeah, that's why it's lovely to get them restored, but we need to get them restored so that they work, and we need to, we'll be providing sort of training to the staff so that they know how to operate them. When the conditions are a certain temperature, they'll need to do this, that and the other and make sure that the camellias are happy.
And your replacement glazing bars, will they be solid copper?
Bronze. So
Bronze.
yeah, we obviously want to keep with the metal.
Yeah.
We don't want to, again, give a risk of iron corroding again. So the new ones will be bronze, and then we'll try and recycle as many of the old ones in good condition. But yeah, they'll be fantastic, magnificent windows when they're operating.
Don't camellias need a certain level of humidity, and how will that be counteracted with or interspersed with the human use of the room?
Well, I think because it's been open to the element, there hasn't been any artificial humidity provided to them for the last 10 or 20 years.
It's going to be closed, though, isn't it?
It will be closed, yeah. So if anything, there'll be it will be a more humid environment. But again, that can be managed by the ventilation and the heating. So the underfloor heating will be able to kind of balance that humidity, because obviously when you warm up a space, the humidity drops. So it will be careful management with like we do in every room here now. There's humidistat somewhere in this room telling us exactly what the humidity is. It's a case of balancing it, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yes, Dave.
The iron roof struts.
Yeah.
We know that they're sort of said early 19th century.
Yeah.
Has there been any evidence of where they've come from? I'm thinking possibly they come from the ironworks Elsica.
Yeah, good question. I guess because we haven't been able to get up to every single one, we haven't identified any stamps but when they come off,
We'll be able to.
we'll be able to see, yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
So they use Newton chambers down in Chapel Town for some of the
Okay.
standard.
Yeah, I'm sure when we get them off and we can look at them in more detail, we'll be looking out for.
Yeah.
Some questions at the back.
Yeah,
there.
question mark?
You mentioned about the elevation being off and that you asked the engineers to check that.
Yeah.
What was the cause of that? Is that related to engine mining or
Yeah, well, we don't know definitively why it's leaning, but yeah, we think because that mining came up so close, I mean, it really was within sort of 20 metres and very deep mining, that just the ground has kind of lent in. But we have been monitoring it for the last year, so that was something that we identified early on, obviously. And the structural engineers kind of monitor it exactly like with laser. They take a scan and then they come back a month later and take the same scan and work out if anything's moved, and it hasn't. So it is kind of stabilised, and there's no cracks on the side elevations that are kind of moving or opening up. So it's lent, it's stable. We don't have to do too much to kind of counteract it, but other than making it comfortable inside.
Yeah, and we'll continue to monitor as well.
Yes.
I like the use of renewables. I mean, it's very innovative in buildings this all. Is there any plan to generate on site rooftop solar and things like that, or is that not approved by English Heritage?
Shall I explore that?
Yeah.
So are we planning to regenerate on site using solar? So we're really committed as a trust to trying to use renewable energies wherever possible, given the historic setting of the building. So that applies to the design of buildings as we're restoring them, but it also applies to us as an organisation and how we operate. So things like use of single plastics in the cafe, and and how staff are trained. So we're always exploring ways of using renewables, and I would say never say never. Solar panels are a more difficult proposition than ground source heat pumps, I have to say, when it comes to heritage settings. And just to name drop a little bit here, I will say that when I had a conversation with the Prince of Wales, he said to me he's been trying to get solar panels at Windsor Castle, and even he can't get them. So I think, even though Dame Julie Kenny is a force to be reckoned with, if the Prince of Wales can't make it happen, although I wouldn't put it past her. Who knows is the answer.
Yeah, I think people are becoming more and more used to the idea, and we just got permission for solar panels on Chester Cathedral, so a Grade 1 listed building, and so people are opening their minds up a little bit to it. But
I think there's a lot of pressure on historic England as well to go with the times, I'm sure. There's this lady who's been asking.
How long is the delivery phase?
Delivery phase, hopefully, we'll find out tomorrow because the tenders come back and they'll have programmes in them. But for delivering the project, building it, we're hoping it will be about 9 months.
Yeah, I think we plan to open in April next year as a business. Mm-hmm.
Do you have a question?
It was the same question actually,
All right.
but I also was interested in you planning on using it for more for larger events. So do you have a plan to tie in the use of other structures to make the events larger, or will it be constrained to the size of the buildings? I'm thinking weddings and things.
Yeah. So it's not very. I mean, there's about 40 to 60 covers inside, isn't there? And then some more covers outside. So you can't have a really large event in there anyway. We could look to use other structures outside, but we're also developing the stables, so there will be big event space up at the stables, where we would encourage the bigger events to go. We are going to put power outside, aren't we? A power point outside on the front of the lawn there. So it is possible that you could put a marquee up for certain occasions. But to be honest, as a trust, we're committed to providing public access, and what we don't want to do is get a situation where it's open to public and then it's not open to public, and it's open to the public, it's not open to the public. So if there are, for example, weddings or anything going on, it may only be 1 or 2 a year that we do at the Camellia House. I think certainly in the evenings there will be events, and in the summer it would be a fabulous place to have a summer party, because you could use the Camellia House as your base, but then obviously have the garden as well. So I think for evening events it'll be great. Yeah, subject to the Yorkshire weather, but it's been pretty good in the last couple of years, certainly through the summer anyway.
I was mistaken in thinking that Shinwell's mining was open cast.
Yeah.
But certainly it was deep.
No, it was open cast, yeah.
So did they run approaches under the Camellia House and take Avens out of there?
No, I think just because they dug down so deep for the open cast mining, so close to the Camellia, it just kind of made it a bit unstable underneath it.
And when they backfilled it as well, there's obviously settling, and so there was movement when the settling took place.
Any more questions?
I just want to say congratulations on putting discussing. That's really fantastic and forward thinking.
Thank
you. In the field of learning disability, so I'm really, really impressed by that. Thank you.
Thank you. We're really committed to being as accessible as we can. Again, not just in how we design the buildings, but how we operate. So making sure all our staff are really trained on how to deal with autism and dementia and things like that. And yeah, we'll be doing a lot of things actually imminently to improve our accessibility. So it's a really big thing for us.
Yes.
It's probably outside your brief, but have you given a nod to the menagerie that was in front of the Camellia House in any
Yeah,
shape
well,
or form?
yeah, it is. So
I'm not suggesting animals.
yeah, we have within our interpretation, obviously Dorian's the architect, so has been talking about the architectural development tonight, but there is an interpretation plan that goes with this, and a really extensive, £500,000 worth of activity plan. So as you will have heard me say before, I'm sure, you can spend millions on buildings, restoring them, but if you don't take your community with you and bring activities and get people involved right from the start, these projects simply don't work. So we are dedicating £500,000 to new activities around education and learning and community engagement, and certainly in interpretation. And in the interpretation, we're definitely going to be giving a nod to the menagerie. Yes.
It's interesting that you say the tea house was built in 1738.
36.
1730, even better. Because in 1730, the definitive guide to tea in England was written by a guy called Thomas Short, and it's dedicated to the Marquis of Rockingham.
Well, that's really useful, isn't it? Bearing in mind it's going to become a tea house.
Well, it's amazing. It's an amazing coincidence that within 6 years a tea house was being built after Lady Mary Finch in particular being in correspondence with Thomas Short, and you're giving us this complete, this is how you drink tea, make tea, how it cures dropsy, absolutely everything. And then of course next year it's the 250th anniversary of the Boston Tea Party, which the successor, not the invention, the brother, was eminently involved with.
And the Camellia House is going to, Dorian's obviously been talking about it in terms of a cafe, but it's actually going to be a specialist global tea house. So we will be specialising in teas from across the world and how to take tea. We'll be doing exactly that. We'll be featuring different teas. We'll be working with different groups from our communities as well. Tea's a really wonderful thing because it's a real leveller. You know, it doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, what ethnicity you are, everybody drinks tea, everybody enjoys tea, and people drink it differently, and people have different food with it. So we're going to be really focusing on working with different groups, finding out about how they take tea and learning from them, and then introducing those teas onto our menus. So yeah, it will be a specialist tea house, which is
the tea she had at the in the long gallery, the
afternoon teas. Yeah, well, we'll still do afternoon teas in the house, but this will be tea as in drinking tea. You know, it'll be specialist tea, but we'll feature teas from across the world, and yeah, we'll really encourage different people to come and join us for drinking tea. Yeah, because it's part of its history. Any more questions for Dorian? No? Can I, should we give Dorian a round of applause, because he's done a great job this year.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dorian. He's a dream to work with, he really is. So you're going to be back next month giving a lecture on the work that's been going on at the stables. This man does not sleep. Keep working. I think there's 3 more lectures coming up, so really nice to see so many of you here tonight. I hope to see you all at the next one, and have a very safe journey home. And just remember, tomorrow the big storm's coming, so get yourselves home and get warm. Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thank you very much.